Can true luxury, like real top-tier luxury, actually be found at, well, a surprisingly steep bargain? It's kind of a core question, isn't it? About value, aspiration, and the sometimes brutal facts of depreciation. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something truly intriguing. A specific 2011 Aston Martin Rapide. It's up for sale right now for, get this, $45,500.
45. Wow.
Right, now look, it's not just about a car for sale. I mean, it is, but it's more like a window, into automotive history, some clever engineering, and yeah, how value can just plummet.
It really can, especially at that end of the market.
Exactly. And we'll definitely touch on where this story started, an online article framing it as nice price or no dice. That's a popular thing, right, where people vote if it's a good deal.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I know the one.
But our mission here, as always, is to go deeper, to find the real story behind this specific car, what it represents. The source article, it grabs you right away. It talks about the Rapide having tight quarters and high sills, even though it's a four-door.
Right, that contradiction. Elegant, but maybe not super practical.
Precisely. So we're going to unpack its history, how it was built, which is surprisingly interesting, and figure out if that $45,000 price tag reflects real value or, maybe a whole load of potential headaches.
And that's exactly why we're digging into this. It's not just reviewing a used car listing. It's about exploring what makes a car like the Rapide unique in the grand scheme of things. How its design choices, even the compromises, reflect what it was meant to be, and what that current market value, that really low price, tells us about luxury cars and their whole life cycle.
Yeah.
So our goal here is to synthesize all these interesting bits from the source, the history, the engineering quirks, even the manufacturing realities. We want to give you, the listener, a really rounded understanding.
Makes sense.
So as we go through this, keep this question in mind. $45,500 for something that cost, what, over $200,000 new? Is this 2011 Rapide a hidden gem, a genuine steal?
The dream find.
Or is it a much more complex thing, something that might bring, well, challenges and big bills down the line? What parts of its story, its build, its condition jump out at you as we unpack it all? Let's start peeling back those layers.
Okay, let's do it. So yesterday, we were talking about that Chevy Monte Carlo SS, the Intimidator edition. The source called it a mobile shrine to Dale Earnhardt.
Right, very much a tribute car.
Exactly. And while that car was all about being a tribute, this Aston Martin Rapide, it's totally different. It stands on its own. It's not promoting anyone else. It's just an Aston Martin.
It's its own statement.
Purely its own design and history. No racer logos, nothing like that. Which, leads me to ask you, our listener, what pops into your head when you hear Aston Martin?
Usually James Bond, right? Or a sleek two-door coupe.
Almost certainly, yeah.
Okay.
Probably not a four-door sedan or a saloon, as they say in Europe. And that's what makes the Rapide fascinating right from the start. It kind of breaks the mold.
It absolutely does. And that's where the Rapide really carves out its unique spot in Aston Martin history. The source makes a really clear, very important point here, which is key to understanding this car.
Okay.
The Rapide, sold between 2010 and 2020, holds the distinction of being the very first four-door saloon ever offered under the Aston Martin name.
The first Aston-badged four-door. That's huge.
It's a massive deal for the brand. Now, to really get why that's so significant, we need to look at the history, specifically Aston Martin's relationship with the Lagonda brand.
Ah, okay. I know they're connected.
Very much so. The source points out that Aston Martin, this prestigious little company from Warwickshire, does have a history with four-doors. But, and this is the key bit, they were always branded as Lagondas.
Always Lagonda, never Aston, for the four-doors until the Rapide.
Precisely. Aston Martin actually bought Lagonda just after World War II. And this timing is interesting because it happened right at the start of Aston's so-called golden era under David Brown.
The DB era, DB5, DB6.
Exactly. That period defined Aston Martin, creating those iconic DB cars we all know. The Rapide name itself, interestingly, was borrowed directly from Lagonda. It wasn't just pulled out of thin air.
A nod to the past, then.
Definitely. The name Rapide was used on Lagonda models even before Aston owned them. And then, significantly, it popped up again in 1961 on a four-door saloon.
Oh, okay.
And that 1961 Lagonda Rapide was important because it was actually based on the Aston Martin DB4 platform. So it was Aston engineering under a Lagonda four-door body.
So they were using Lagonda to test the four-door waters, kinda.
You could say that, yeah. It kept the Aston Martin brand focused purely on sports cars. Now, fast forward a bit, the source says the Aston Martin Rapide's more immediate ancestor is that wild William Townes designed Lagonda from the 70s and 80s.
Oh yeah, the wedge, super futuristic, really angular, polarizing, I think is the word.
Definitely polarizing, stood out for sure. The source also mentions that around the same time this Aston Martin Rapide came out, they also made another Lagonda, the Tarf.
The Taraf, right. Super expensive, wasn't it?
Extremely. Ultra exclusive, short production run, sold pretty much only in the Middle East. So that, again, reinforces Lagonda as the place for Aston's more, let's say, niche or experimental four-door ideas, separate from the main Aston sports car line.
Okay, so that history really matters. Lagonda was the four-door brand. Aston was the two-door sports car brand.
Exactly. So connecting that to the bigger picture, what does this long-standing separation tell us about the brand's identities? Even under one owner, Lagonda was often where Aston pushed design boundaries or tested luxury saloon concepts.
Right.
So the source is right to highlight that it was really significant when Aston Martin finally put its own name on a four-door with this Rapide. It makes you ask, why then? Was it about broadening Aston's appeal, tapping into that growing market for performance sedans like the Porsche Panamera?
Competing with Porsche, maybe?
Yeah, possibly. Or was it a statement that the Aston Martin brand itself was now strong enough, mature enough, to include a four-door without, diluting its sporty image? It really speaks to how these old brands evolve, trying to stay relevant while holding onto their heritage.
That Lagonda history definitely puts the first four-door Aston thing in a whole new light. It wasn't out of nowhere, more like a strategic shift.
A very considered evolution, yeah.
Okay, so let's get under the skin. Because how they built the Rapide, and actually a lot of Astons from that time, is pretty clever. It's based on what they call the VH platform, vertical horizontal.
Sounds technical.
It does, maybe a bit dry, but it's actually really insightful about how Aston Martin operated.
Yeah.
Think of VH as like Aston Martin's high-performance Lego set.
Okay, I like that analogy. Legos.
Yeah. Instead of starting every single car from a completely blank sheet, which is super expensive and takes ages, they designed these core, expensive-to-make sections. Things like the firewall between the engine and cabin, the door pillars, these crucial structural bits.
More fundamentals.
Right. They designed them as sort of interchangeable modules, lockdown components, so they could then design a new model, like a DB9 or a Vantage, by basically stretching or shrinking the bits between these modules.
Ah, so flexibility built in.
Exactly. And the source points out two big benefits. One, it was way cheaper to develop new models because they reuse these core bits. Two, it made building each actual car much faster. For a relatively small company like Aston, competing with giants, that efficiency is huge.
And that VH architecture, as the source says, was used for, well, pretty much everything Aston built in the early 2000s. And the Lagonda Taraf, too.
Everything, like the DB9, Vantage.
DB9 Vantage, DBS, the Mirage, this Rapide, a whole range of cars, all sharing those basic structural bones.
Wow.
So if you zoom out, what does that tell you about Aston's engineering philosophy back then?
It was kind of the art of illusion, maybe? Projecting this image of pure bespoke craft.
Hand-built exclusivity. Right. While underneath, they were being incredibly efficient by sharing engineering. They could mass-produce the expensive bits, then spend the money saved on the things that really made it an Aston. The hand-stitched leather, the unique styling, the engine tuning.
So it let them compete.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It let them bring out different models, different wheelbases, styles, performance, much faster and cheaper than starting from scratch each time. Vital for survival.
Were there downsides? Did they all feel the same to drive?
That's a fair question. The source doesn't really mention downsides, but you could argue maybe there's a risk of them feeling too similar if you don't tune them carefully. But Aston Martin engineers were pretty renowned for making each model feel distinct. Suspension, steering, engine mapping. They were generally seen as doing a really good job with VH, balancing efficiency with that bespoke feel.
Okay, so VH was key. But let's talk about an even weirder connection, something more recent and, well, less successful. The Fisker Ocean.
The electric SUV, that kind of, yeah.
That belly flopped, as the source puts it. What on earth does a 2011 Aston Martin Rapide have in common with a Fisker Ocean?
I am intrigued. Where's the link?
Okay, get this. Both the Fisker Ocean and the Aston Martin Rapide were built in the exact same factory in Austria by Magna Steyr.
Magna Steyr, the contract manufacturer. So Aston outsourced the Rapide's production.
They did. This icon of British luxury, built in Austria by a third party. And the connection goes further. Henrik Fisker himself.
The designer behind Fisker.
Yep. He also partially designed the Aston Martin DB9, which, as the source notes, shares its basic VH platform with our Rapide.
Wow, okay. Small world in car manufacturing.
Isn't it? Thankfully, the source adds that's pretty much where the similarities between the Aston and the Fisker end. Quite a different outcome for those two cars.
That Fisker link definitely shows how globalized car making is, even for luxury brands. But let's get back to the heart of the Rapide, the engine, the powertrain.
Yeah, the good stuff.
Under that long bonnet, this
Yeah.
2011 Rapide has a 470 horsepower, 5.9-liter V12. And the origin story is pretty famous, isn't it?
The source says it famously originated from two Ford Duratec V6s welded together.
Yeah, sounds a bit crude, like Frankenstein's engine, but it was actually pretty clever engineering.
How did that happen? Ford V6s in an Aston.
Well, remember Ford owned Aston Martin back in the 90s when this V12 was developed?
Ah, right. During that key period again.
Exactly. So Aston could tap into Ford's massive engineering resources, use their reliable Duratec V6 as a base, and basically create a bespoke V12 without the absolutely massive cost of developing one from scratch, which would have been tough for a small company.
Saved them a fortune, probably.
Almost certainly. And backing up that V12 is a gearbox from ZF, a 6-speed automatic, weld-rutted unit. You get push buttons on the dash for gear selection, plus paddles behind the steering wheel.
Best of both worlds there.
And that Ford connection, it doesn't stop at the engine. The source points out there are a number of other Ford or Ford-adjacent parts inside the Rapide.
Like what?
Things like air vents, even the sat-nav unit apparently came straight from Volvo. And other little bits were shared with Jaguars from that time.
Because Ford owned Volvo and Jaguar, too, back then.
You got it. Major parts been rating across their premium auto group. It let Aston use proven, reliable bits, get Ford's economies of scale, but still wrap it all in that Aston Martin luxury feel.
So it raises that question again, doesn't it? Does using Ford, Volvo, Jaguar parts dilute the Astonness?
It's the eternal debate with luxury cars built under larger umbrellas. On one hand, it's pragmatic, controls costs, speeds things up, improves reliability using proven components. It's how smaller brands survive. On the other hand, yeah, does a Volvo air vent feel special enough in a $200,000 car? For some purists, maybe not. But maybe it's just smart engineering, letting Aston focus their money on the unique stuff, the V12's roar, the leather, the bodywork, rather than reinventing every single switch. It's that balancing act again, practicality versus perception.
It's a constant tightrope walk for these brands. Okay, let's bring it back to this specific car, the one for sale. It's not just theoretical. It's a real 2011 Rapide looking for a new owner.
Right. What are the details on this one?
Source says it has 39,400 miles, which for a 2011 car feels driven but not abused.
Yeah, reasonable mileage, around 3,000 miles a year. Sounds like it hasn't just sat there.
And visually, it sounds incredible. Elegant gray over a tan and black, full leather interior. Classic, sophisticated combo.
It must look.
The source says it appears flawless, which is quite a statement for a car this age. And the seller claims it's been well loved. And here's the kicker, kept in a climate-controlled garage.
That's what you want to hear. Suggest proper care.
Definitely. We should all have it so nice, the source jokes. Plus, some practical points. It's got new Michelin tires on the 20-inch wheels.
Good sign. Tires aren't cheap for these. Shows the owner wasn't skimping on maintenance.
Exactly. And the seller claims it's been properly maintained by an Aston Martin technician. Big plus. And it has a clean Carfax report.
Okay, so all the key reassuring boxes seem to be ticked. Sounds like a well-kept example. Where is it located?
Found on Facebook Marketplace out of Los Angeles.
Right, so on paper it sounds almost perfect. Maybe too perfect. But the source does bring up those inherent trade-offs with the Rapide's design. Things any buyer needs to know.
Like the styling versus the space?
Exactly. It's got that undeniable, slinky negligee styling, as the source puts it.
Okay.
That long, low, gorgeous look. But the price you pay for that beauty is a cramped cabin.
Even though it has 4 doors.
Especially in the back. The source specifically says the rear buckets are especially tight. And that's really important for a 4-door saloon. It looks like it should be practical, but
it prioritizes style over rear legroom.
Completely. Those rear seats, while luxurious little buckets, are really best for short trips or smaller people. And those high sills we mentioned earlier, they add to that feeling of being quite enclosed, not airy like some big luxury sedans.
So it's more of a 2+2 Grand Tourer that happens to have rear doors.
That's a really good way to put it, actually. It's about the driving experience and the style. With the option of carrying extra passengers occasionally, it tells you who Aston Martin was targeting.
Someone who wants the Aston driving experience but sometimes needs back seats.
Exactly. Not someone needing a spacious family car for regular four-up journeys. So for a potential buyer at $45,500, maybe comparing it to more conventional luxury cars, that lack of rear space is crucial. Is the beauty worth the squeeze? It's a deliberate design choice reflecting its purpose.
A beautiful choice, but a choice nonetheless. Which brings us right back to the main question from the article, the the $45,500 question. Will this 2011 Aston Martin Rapide prove a fast sale?
And the answer really hangs on that depreciation, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The source hammers this home. That $45,500 price, it's a good bit less than a quarter of the original $200,000 plus sticker price.
Less than a quarter. Just let that sink in.
Over 75% of its value gone. The article even jokes it's tariff-free, too. Like it's dropped so much, import taxes are irrelevant now. You gotta love depreciation, it says. It's just staggering.
It is staggering. And it forces us to ask, why such a massive drop? What does it tell us about the market for these older, high-end luxury sports cars?
Yeah, what's the so what of that depreciation?
Well, it's probably a mix of things. Part of it is just natural obsolescence, right? The tech moves on, designs change, newer models come out that make older ones seem, well, older. Even beautiful ones like this.
Keeping up with the Joneses, luxury car style.
Kind of, yeah. But the big factor, the one the source directly mentions, is the potential headache and out-of-warranty Aston might cause.
Ah, the running costs. The fear factor.
Exactly. That's probably the biggest driver of depreciation here. What does that mean in real terms? It means everything is expensive. Parts are specialized, often hard to get. Labor from certified techs costs a premium. Even just regular servicing can be eye-wateringly expensive compared to a normal car.
So that risk, real or perceived, just tanks the resale value.
Hugely. Even on a car that seems perfectly maintained like this one, it's like the market builds in the expected future costs. That low entry price is almost hiding the potential long-term expense. It's the luxury paradox.
The paradox being cheap to buy, potentially ruinous to own.
That's the risk, yeah. So it really demands critical thinking from a buyer. You're weighing that incredible allure, the stately elegance at a bargain price, against the cold, hard reality of ownership costs. That $45,500 is just the ticket to get in the door. You need a buffer for what comes next.
Right.
For some people, the thrill, the beauty, the badge. It's absolutely worth it. They'll accept the potential costs. For others, the pragmatists, that potential headache is just too much risk. It really comes down to personal priorities and, frankly, your bank balance.
It's that ultimate dream versus reality check, isn't it? The dream is the car. The reality could be the repair bills. So, like the article asks, does that seem like a deal to slip into a tight suit of a car? Or is that too much for the headache and out-of-warranty Aston might cause?
That sums it up perfectly.
It really forces you to weigh desire against practicality. So we've really dug deep today, haven't we, into this 2011 Aston Martin Rapide. From its unique four-door history with Lagonda, the clever VH platform, the Ford connections,
right down to this specific, seemingly immaculate car.
And wrestled with that absolutely massive depreciation. It's shown us this fascinating mix of history, design trade-offs, and the stark economics of luxury cars. So maybe the final thought to leave you, our listener, with is this. When a car loses, say, 3/4 of its value, did that truly make it more accessible? Does it democratize luxury?
Or does it just reveal the true cost of running such a machine? A cost hidden by the initial depreciation, but waiting down the road.
Yeah, does that low entry price really reflect the total cost of ownership for these kinds of vehicles? It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories like this, amazing bargains, potential burdens, are just waiting out there in the used car world?